Okay, I have another series here with me tonight. Uh, Also, happy Halloween. This book is called The Horn God of the Witches. It's by Jason Mankey. Um, I also have this one in paperback. So I'm gonna read it just like I did the other one. Uh, Starting with the back. The Horn God of the Witches is a tour de force of history, myth, art, academic research, and spiritual practice, all conveyed in Mankey's eminently approachable style. The resulting book is a delight to read, both in erudite trilogy of modern pagan theology and passionate uh, pan to its numerous divine subject, the Horn One. Discover the history, magic, and myths of the Horn One. Explore the deep ritual roots of the Horn God and discover rituals and activities designed to help you get closer to him. Throughout history, horn deities have been honored as gods of nature, sex, fertility, passion, sacrifice, death, and rebirth. The Horn God of the Witches reveals the origins and features of their most common guises, Senunos, Herne, Ellen of the Ways, the Green Man, and even the Devil. Whether you are interested in the Wiccan Horn God, a more contemporary composite of several deities, or in one of his many other forms, these rituals of meeting the powerful deity will help you achieve your magical goals. With hands-on techniques of divination, creating an altar, working magic, spiritual lovemaking, and receiving the gifts of the Witch Father, this book supports a transformative deepening of our relationship to the divine. Jason Mankey is a third degree Gardnerian high priest and helps run two witchcraft covens in the San Francisco Bay Area with his wife, Ari. Jason is a popular speaker at pagan witchcraft events across North America and Great Britain. He contributes to Witches, Pagans magazines, and writes online for Popular's Pagan at Rise the Horns, and you can find him on Instagram and Twitter at Penmankey. Okay, so this is the introduction. Finding the Horror God. Witchcraft practices are as varied as the snowflakes that fall in winter. There are witches who work in covens and witches who prefer to work independently. Witchcraft practices can be thousands of years old or exceedingly contemporary. There are witches who have learned from teachers in group settings, and witches who are self taught, trusting their intuition and perhaps learning from books and other resources. Many witches build their practices around the use of magic, with little use of any other trappings. I know some witches whose rites are focused almost exclusively on the dead, both those who have died during their lifetime and also the souls of long ago, ancestors from thousands of years ago. There are witches whose practices revolve around nature, the turn of the season, and the power of the natural world. And then there are witches like me who work primarily with deities. The most prominent one in my life, bringing the figure most people call the Horn God. The Horn God is a god, a title, and a way for of describing particular deities found in the various strains of modern witchcraft. The horn god can even be a horn goddess or perhaps have no gender at all. And he is certainly straight, gay, transgender, and everything in between. I have to assume that as a force greater than mere mortals, deity is complex and most likely appears in different forms to different people. Over the last 8 years, most authors of witchcraft have written about the horn god as a single, generally ancient deity. According to this line of thinking, every horned or antler deity is simply a reflection of the original one horned god. In all horned and antler deities share a multitude of tracing characteristics. This is a loving piece of mythology, but it is just not true. But there was never just one horn god in pagan and antiquity. Instead, there are a multitude of horned and antler deities. All of them are unique and different, with not all that much in common. For the last 100 years, the horn god has been pictured in a variety of ways, but his most important visual attribute is the set of horns and antlers atop his head. Yes, antlers and horns are very different things. Horns are permanent structures. While antlers are shed and regrown annually, but pictures of the horn god have included antlers for a very long time now, and antlered god just don't roll off the tongue as easily. Defining the horn god. The term horn god means different things to different people. Some of the horn god is synonymous with nature and wild spaces. This is a horn god whose journey through the wheel of the year mirrors the changes of seasons, moving from youthful promise to young adulthood, middle age, and finally death. In my own practice, the horn god is a figure who stands between two realms, this world and the lands of death. In many modern myths of the horn god, he has become a sacrificial deity, given his own life so that the world may be renewed and made fertile once again. The horn god's association with fertility has led many to think of him as a god of sex and lust, and as a provider of much that is good and pleasurable in our lives. But the horn god is generally seen as being more than just a deity of passion and the wineskins. He is representative of he's representative of a balanced life, a figure who embraces joy but also accepts responsibility and lives up to them. The first modern public self-identifying witch was an Englishman named Gerald Gardner, 1884 through 16 sorry, through 1964. Today, Gardner is held by many as the founder or architect of Wiccan witchcraft, but his writings on witchcraft in general have been tremendously influential over the last 80 years. Gardner is quite explicit that the god of the witches is a god with horns, antlers atop his head, but which means the horn god has been one of modern witchcraft's essential deities since witchcraft became an ongoing public concern. In his 1959 book, The Meaning of Witchcraft, Gardner writes about the horn god of the witches as embodying most of the traits he's associated with today. In particular, uh, in one particular striking passage, he calls the horn god the operator of the doorway of the womb and the lord of the gates of death. But to Gardner, the horn god was more than just a figure residing in a faraway realm. Gardner also placed the horn god firmly in our world as king of the wood and described him as the renewer of life. More than a deity of the wild spaces, the horn god was also the god of gardens through his power as the Follett god. The witch god written about in by Gardner was nearly limitless, described as the all devourer, all begetter, and the beloved savior of the world. Gardner's horn god was not just a being with an erect a phallus and horns or antlers atop his head. He's the god of witches and one who resides over many of the currents that guide and shape our lives. Today, most witches see the horn god in ways similar to that of Gardner, though they may individually emphasize one characteristics more than others. The horn god is a god of nature, sex, fertility, sacrifice, death, and rebirth, and is also the figure to aspire to. Because these ideas are so important to understanding him, they are worth going over in a bit more detail. Nature in the natural world. Perhaps first and foremost, the horn god is a figure that links us to the natural world. He's the god of the wilderness, the dark forests, majestic mountains, and sun swept prairies. He's He's the lord of the wood and the magic that keeps us firmly rooted in nature, even if we are living in an apartment in a city of 1 million people. Horns and antlers also link the horn god to wild animals. The horn god can be seen in the face of a stag or bull because many of the antlers and horns atop his head come from game animals. The horn god is also a deity of responsible and ethical hunting practices. The horn god is the personification of nature, which means he can be both gentle and fierce. He is as pleasant as a warm spring day and as powerful as an autumn hurricane. Nature is sometimes scary. We should expect the same from the god who is a part of it. As a deity who is a part of nature, the horn god is also the protector of the earth's wild spaces. He is the deity to call on when the government turns its back on preserving the natural world. I'm not sure I'd call the horn god vengeful, but uh, polluters should probably be worried about him. Sex, fertility, and sacrifice. As a god of nature, the horn god is as a god of fertility. Fertility is about more than human babies. It is about rich soil, blossoming flowers, and ripe fields. In some traditions, the horn god annually sacrifices his essence to the autumn so that the natural world can be reborn in the spring. The horn god is also the god of sexual pleasure. Sex and sexuality are his gifts. There are something to be celebrated when engaged in consensually and not used to shame others. In many myths, the horn god's sexual interests are strictly females, but history tells a different story. Horn gods, like the Greek Pan, were equal opportunity sexual adventurers, loving men, women, their own hand, and everything in between. The horn god embraces everyone who seeks him, regardless of sexual orientation. He is a life admiring deity of a sex and pleasure is a lifetime affirming activity. He wants to enjoy our time here on earth, as fleeting as it may be. In workshops, I often describe the horn god as horned and horny, because deities that focus primarily on sex seem to be a major part of the horn god's mythos. If there's one identifying feature of the horn god other than the horns, especially the many male versions, it's the erect phalphus. Depictions of the horn god are not required to include raging boner, but it's become fairly common. Even gods who weren't pictured in antiquity, uh, with erect phalluses like the Gaulish Celtic Cernunnos, sometimes are depicted with an excited member. How sexual the horn god is probably depends on how horny we need him to be in our own lives. Death and resurrection. It stands to reason that as a god of the natural world, the horn god is also the lord of death. Without death, there is no life. Both are necessary to keep the world going. A god of the hunt is also a deliverer of death, further linking the horn god to the world beyond this one. The French phrase la, la, la petite mort translates as the little death and generally refers uh, to orgasms, so there's that too. But the horn god does more than just usher souls into the realm of the dead. He also gives them safe passage back to the land of the living. For witches who believe in reincarnation, it is often the horn god who guards the portal between the summer lands and this world. It is it's this aspect of the horn god who rules at the Sabbath of Samhain and stands in wait for us when our mortal bodies die. A more perfect man. One of my earliest memories of the horn god did not come from mere personal experience or from a book, but rather from the cover image of Green Egg magazine, a periodical that was especially popular among pagans in the 1990s. On that cover, the horn god held up a young child in his hands above his head with a great smile on his face. It was an image filled with joy on a figure who knew and understood his responsibilities. In a world full of misogynist, racist, bigots, and other assholes, the horn god is a figure to aspire to. He is a father, a lover, a nurturer, and a protector. He represents the best of what we can be in a world where we too often feel let down by those around us. The horn god is a figure who always rises to the occasion. Unlike some other deities, the horn god is not a god of judgment. His disapproval is reserved for those who put themselves ahead of others in the natural world. He wants us to be happy, to live a life of joy and pleasure, but only if we can live that life without impeding the free will of others. The horn god, the horn gods, and witches. When I refer to the horn god in this book, in my mind I am referencing a real god. To me, he is more than just a title or a type of energy. He is a distinct being, most likely created from several different parts. In my and in my mind, the horn god is part Pan and part uh, Cernunnos, and also contains just a little bit of the Christian devil and several other small bits. In this book, we'll be exploring all those different angles. Sections of this book will also focus on specific horn gods. The general term is, are not or the general term that does not indicate a specific being. I've also attempted to limit the focus of this book to the horn god as worshipping in by modern witches today. I believe that most cultures have a figure where we might label as a horn god, but I am not sure that they should be included in a book specifically for witches. While witches are free to work with whatever deities call to them, I think that I think it's in poor taste to include extensive material on powers and deities who are still actively worked with uh, and worshipped in cultures outside of modern witchcraft. This means I've decided not to write about figures such as the Hindu Shiva and the Navajo Coco Cocopelli, more accurately known as Cucopolo. For those of you looking for more information on such gods, I hope you'll consult the bibli, bibli, bibliography for more information or visit with the people who actively work with those gods. This book also has a very European slant, which I apologize for in advance, but the horn god, as experienced by most self identified modern witches, has the deepest roots in Europe. While I find both of these horn uh, while I find both the use of horns in ancient China and the symbolism of the phallus in ancient India to be fascinating, they just didn't feel appropriate to include in this book. As stated above, there's a pretty long uh, bib- bibliography in the back for those interested in additional information on such things. This book is already pretty long and indicates over 280 footnotes. I think my editors would scream if I made it any longer. The horn god, as we know him today, is both ancient and a modern construct, and the way this book is laid out reflects that. After exploring the nature of deity, I chose to start this book by relating the horned one's most prevalent myth in modern witchcraft circles and exploring the most ancient aspects of the horn god, antler horn, and phallus imagery. Then I examine two specific deities, Pan and Cernunnos, the phallus imagery. Oh, sorry. I lost my place. Pan and Cernunnos. The story of the horn god is the story of Cernunnos and Pan more so than any other two gods, both in the way they were worshipped in the ancient world and how they've been reinterpreted in ours. From there, the book spends more time with a couple of more modern horn gods, Heron, Ellen of the Waves, and the Green Man. I also call these aspects of the Horn One more modern for reasons that will become apparent later in the text. While these figures are most likely not as ancient in Pan and Cernunnos, they are certainly very real and tangible deities and are important to me as well. Most of the sections about specific deities include activities designed to help you, the reader, grow closer to them. My original outline in this book included the ritual for every god mentioned in these pages. In the course of writing all those rituals, I realized that many of them felt repetitive, and besides, there are a multitude of ways to grow closer to a deity outside of ritual. Divination, altars, and magic, along with ritual, are all great ways to access the horn god in his many guises. I find history interesting, but the most important thing in witchcraft is to grow closer to the things you honor, which is why activities are important. Over the last 200 years, the horn god has been influenced by a variety of literary sources. Most of that literature is has focused on the horn one in one of three aspects: nature, deity, death god, and a being somehow associated with the Christian devil. Most of most of the book's middle section focuses on these three aspects, along with a few journals, side journeys into the various things that didn't quite fit anywhere else in these pages. A bit about the Horn One being associated with the Christian devil can be a bit troubling to some, so let me expand on it a bit. The Horn God of the Witches has never been the Christian devil, but he has been influenced by how certain people have interpreted the Christian devil over the centuries. Writing about the devil have shown up in books about the Horn God and have contributed to our understanding of him, but that does not mean Pan or the Green Man is ruling over the underworld full of fire and brimstone. I'll also add that some witches really like to play up the links between the Horn God and the devil, not because they are especially wicked, but because it's fun to piss off uptight Christians. The last part of the book looks at how the Horn God is viewed and has been reinterpreted over the past few decades in the traditions of Wiccan witchcraft and traditional witchcraft. The book ends with a ritual to the Witch Father, a version of the Horn God in traditional witchcraft, and one who is especially appealing to me. In many ways, the first ritual to meet the Horn God, and its last ritual to meet the Witch Father can be seen in as minor opposites. The first ritual serves as an interpretation to the Horn God's mysteries, while the final ritual is a chance to receive the gifts he willingly gives to his witches. There are many individuals who choose to capitalize pronouns such as his and he when they refer to a specific deity. This is a practice I never truly adopted, so I made the decision not to use it in this book. Some might find that choice disrespectful to the Horn One, but since he allows me to write this book, I feel like everything is fine in our relationship. A book such as this one cries out for dozens of pictures, and in my travels over the last 10 years, I've seen many of the things I write about in these pages. However, the copyright law when it comes to pictures uh, and when it comes to pictures is infuriatingly difficult to navigate. Just because you take a picture at a museum does not give you the right to use it in a picture book. However, we are lucky enough to live in an age where most of us have access to the internet, which is home to most everything mentioned in these pages. In other words, with a little work, you should be able to find the images I mention that are not included. It is it's also my hope that no matter how you interpret the power of the Horn One, you will find something worthwhile in these pages. The hooves of the Horn God have been guiding my witchcraft journey for over 20 years now. If you so choose, may they guide yours as well. Hell the Horn One. Okay. Um so I'm going to just let me see here. Okay. I'll just go ahead and continue with this. Chapter 1: The Nature of Deity. Perhaps my favorite analogy for describing the Horn God involves Play-Doh. For those of you who have blocked out parts of your childhood, Play-Doh is a soft, easy sculpted, and smush putty like material made primarily of flour, and water. It's fun because you can build whatever you want of it, and most of us have played with it at some point in our lives. Now the horn god is most certainly not Play-Doh, but how we use the substance often reminds me of how various individuals see and interpret him. There are some people who like to build very precious sculptures with Play-Doh, and in our analogy, perhaps they build models of Pan and Cernosus, sorry, Senunos, with each figure being a solid color. During during that play, they are very careful not to let the two horns come into contact with each other because the different colors of Play-Doh can't really be separated after that happens. When they are done playing, they put the different colors of Play-Doh back in their own specific containers to the color so the colors don't bleed together. Then there are those who like to use various colors of Play Doh in the same sculpture, with the end result being streaks of blue and green running through a mostly red sculpture. This is how I used to create things when I was a kid. I didn't mind mixing my colors a bit here and there, but I tried to keep them mostly separate. That was that was hard to do, and when I realized that there would be some mixing no matter what I did, I learned to live with it. When I was done playing, I tried to put things away as neatly as I could, but red Play-Doh sometimes ended up with a slight purple tint and perhaps a vein of yellow running through it. Finally, there are always some people who are completely fine all their color letting all of their colors of Play-Doh mix together. The end result is usually a brown lump with perhaps a few color streaks running through it. For some people, having all the colors mixed together is upsetting, but four cans of brown Play-Doh are still fun. You can still build whatever you want out of it, and you don't have to worry about keeping the different colors of dough apart. Not having to worry about messing anything up often makes play more fun. Besides, if you want a specific color later, you can or make a new jar of it. The horn god is not is the horn god is a lot like Play-Doh. There are different people who prefer to work only with individual models, and when they are done, everything goes back where it started. Then there are some who are okay with a little bleed through here and there, but mostly kept things separate. And finally, there are those who let everything mix together. The horn god who has worshippers who honor only specific deities, others who see those individual gods as somewhat mergeable, and those who see all of the horn gods as in history as part of one big horn god with very little separation. There are many different ways to interpret deity, in no right or wrong way. I believe deity reveals itself to us in whatever way makes the most sense to our personal sensibilities. The various ways humans perceive deity and is useful to go over in a book like this, but ultimately our interpretations are ours alone. Some of us put the Play-Doh back into separate cans, and some of us don't mind ending up with a big brown lump. Many ideas about deity. Witchcraft does not require a belief in gods, nor does it subscribe to any absolutes when it comes to religious and spiritual practice. For those of us who do believe in deity, there are a variety of cos, cosm, cosmologies and explanations for that deity because the horn god means so many things to various witches. It's worth spending some time contemplating the many ideas held by today's witches when it comes to matter of deity. Uh, Polytheism. There are many witches today who are strict poly, poly, polytheist, theistists, which means they believe individual deities are just that, individuals that are not part of a greater whole. In other words, every deity who has ever been worshipped is unique unto themselves. Perhaps certain deities are related in some way, but they are related like you and I are related to our parents. Uh, Polytheists, witches who use the term horn god, do so generally to as a title or as a way to describe certain specific gods. I have friends who use horn god as a title, so when they call to the horn god, they are actually calling to specific deities such as Pan or Cernunnos, but not using the names of those, but not using the names of those gods. Many polytheist witches also use the term horn god lowercase as a way to categorize deities who are connected in some way to the natural world. Soft polytheism. Soft polytheism is a term reserved for those who look at deities as separate deities but still believe that they might be related in some way. For example, we know that the gods of Odin, Norse, and Woden, German, have a common ancestor, but a hard uh, polytheist would say they are two different beings. A soft polytheist would argue that two are most likely the same god, just worshipped by two different names. As a soft polytheist, I think gods like Pan and Cernunnos are distinct between who are distinct beings who don't have much in common, but I also believe that they might be related in some abstract way. The end result is a bigger deity who shares attributes with several other gods. This all sounds rather confusing, but I have to assume that deity is more powerful than we are and different too. I think our modern horn god is a combination of several figures that have come together so that we might better understand them. In our own practice, I honor those figures by their individual names and sometimes collectively as the horn god. Uh, the 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 billionity and all gods are one god. Billionity. There are many who believe that all the deities that have ever been worshipped are related in some way. At the very beginning, as was an unknowable power that started by dividing itself into various ways of being female, male, and all that lies between those two polarities. From there, the powers divided into more knowable forms, deities we know by generic names such as maiden, mother, crone, horn god, sun god, and so on. In this sort of cosmology, all of the various horned and antler gods that have ever been worshipped are aspects of one greater horn god who has chosen to reveal himself in various guises throughout the world. In India, he was Shiva. In Gaul, Cernunnos. In Rome, uh, uh, Fa, Faunus, and in Greece, Pan. The gods of the gods in this sort of construct we are still somewhat distinct but can be traced back to their original source. When I was working with a college student group back in the early 2000s, someone described this theory as the uh, billionity, as opposed to the Christian Trinity. Uh, Dual theism. Many Wiccan witches are often accused of being dual theist. The idea is similar to the one above, and often difference being the only difference being that there is one goddess and one god who are each responsible for the various manifestations of male and female found throughout the world today. Much of the uh, uh, liturgy in Wicca sounds like dual theism, but I have yet to meet a Wiccan who actively self identifies this way. It also limits sexuality to strict constructs of male and female, and an idea no longer supported by science or the reality we live in. Energies. There are some witches who believe that deities are more akin to energies than to beings with a consciousness. When they invoke the horn god, for example, they are invoking the wild energies of the earth for use in their magic or rituals. Gods as energies don't think like you or I do, but they can still affect our reality. For those who subscribe to this interpretation of deity, Earth's energies are natural things that exist around us, and to better understand them, we will give them names like titles. We'll give them names and titles like the Horn God. Though I am not a believer in this theory, I do know that the energy of deities can transform us. When we call out to the horn god and he chooses to show up, his energy has an impact on how we behave and act. Horn god energy might result, for example, in someone becoming sexually excited or feeling closer to the natural world. The gods are manifestations of something inside ourselves. I know several witches who see figures like the horn god as something from inside of ourselves. To them, the horn god represents our relationship with the natural world, witchcraft, and sex. He's a focus for rituals and rites, but his power comes from inside of us. According to this line of thinking, gods and goddesses are human constructs created to give us a sense of direction and purpose. The gods are not real and are not energies. There are very devout atheist witches and pagans in the world. They don't believe in deities and don't even interpret those deities as the natural energies of the earth. Yet they will often use terms such as the horn god in such instances. They are generally putting a poetic spin for references to the world's wild spaces and the mysteries of nature. To them, the horn god is a term that represents the wonder of the natural world and the mysteries of love, lust, and union. The witch world is wide and diverse, and there are many interpretations just what deity is, as there are witches. When it comes to issues of theology, there are no absolutes. You might have found yourself nodding along with some of the ideas presented here, for perhaps your own beliefs are best represented by the combination of these ideas. There is no right or wrong, but just what works for you. Chapter 2. Myth in Ancient History. The 1990s were one of the most formative decades in the history of modern witchcraft. It was a decade that began with letter writing and print magazine and ended with email and blogs. It was a boom period of witchcraft, books written by actual witches, and those books could be found just about anywhere. It was the era of the book superstorm, which featured shelves overflowing with magical and occult topics. Despite all those books and the explosion of witchcraft popularity during the period, there wasn't much out there about the history of the craft and figures like the Horn God, and the material that was available on those topics wasn't very reliable. Uh, uh, the history written about during this period just was just as much heresy as it was documented fact, and that heresy was repeated online in books and around campfires at large pagan gatherings. The lack of quality information wasn't really anyone's fault. It simply didn't exist at the time. Scholars had yet to begin taking modern witchcraft and its deities seriously as an academic discipline, and the studies that were available were generally in difficult to access scholarly journals and books. We take the free flow of information for granted today, but research was far more difficult than just 30 years ago. Histories that make me laugh a bit today were simply the best most authors could do at the time. Um, In fairness, a lot of bad information came from academic resources that had been popular in previous decades, which is like Gerald Gardner, who took their histories from books printed in the early 20th century. Then that particular version of history was shared again and again, with no one ever really bothering to check to see if it still held up. Many of the most popular witch books ever published, and most of them are still bestsellers today, contain history that just doesn't hold up. But for many people, that history has been difficult to let go of. The stories about history of the Horn God that I heard growing up in the 90s are what I've come to call the myth of the Horn God and witchcraft. And I call this body of work a myth for a very particular reason, because some of it is true. Not not only true in the sense that there's a kernel of of historic that there's a kernel of his, 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 historically historicity there, but also true in the mythological sense. Our now acquainted versions of the Horn God's history connect us with our ancient ancestors and to our most recent craft ancestors who shared those stories. The myth of the Horn God is worth telling because the connections that arise from it is also worth retelling because it is very present in the world of witchcraft today. It's a tale that is told around campfires and often held on to as if it were holy writ, despite not holding up to academic scrutiny. It is a history that is also still present in a lot of witchcraft books, and it is a history that speaks to a lot of people. No book on the Horn God would be complete without it. The myth of the Horn God. 15,000 years ago, in the darkness of a massive system of caves located in the modern day France, some unknown person painted the first picture of the Horn God. Though he doesn't quite look like the Horn God many of us know today, he's still recognizable. His feet are those of a man, and he stands upright, and he has a tail, perhaps so that all might see his animal nature. His body is covered in fur, and he clearly has hands instead of hooves or paws. His eyes are recognizable as humans, though there's an odd owl like appearance to his face. Most impressively of all, he has the antlers of a stag atop his head. and in that spot they look completely natural. The antlers are no crown but a part of his very being. The animal attributes, also clearly visible on that cave wall, portray his connection to the earth and natural world. This was no god of war or god of the sky. The horn god was the deity of mountains, plains, and forest. His animal nature also revealed him to be a god of lust, sex, and physical desire. In addition to his horns, he was a god to whom the phallus was sacred. Over time, worship of this horn god would spread from the cave where he was born throughout Europe and later the entire world. The Greeks would come to know this deity as Pan, god of shepherds, and the mountains of the Greek region, also known as Arcadia. Pan was a sexual god par excellence, and over time he would become one of the most popular gods of both Greek and later Roman Empire. His praises would be sung and snogged from Britain to India. Back in France, then known as Gaul, the horn god came to be known as Cernunnos among the Celts as who lived there. We sorry, Celts who lived there. He too was a god of sexual desire and connection to the land, and was praised as the supreme deity uh, of the land. Eventually, the Celts of Gaul took up his worship from across the English Channel and into the land as known as Great Britain. In Britain, the horn god adopted other names, though these were all clearly the same horn deity. In English folklore, he became known as Herne, god of the woods and of the wild hunt. In the area of Sherwood Forest, he was called Robin Hood, and in other places he was known as Puck or Jack in the Green. Whenever one went to the British Isles, one would find the horn god. Over time, the horn god went up everywhere, all because of that image on the cave wall, first envisioned over 10,000 years ago. Every culture has their own version of him, but in all those places, he's essentially the same, the god of nature and fertility. The image might change a bit from place to place, but no matter the location, the figure is still essentially Pan Cernunnos, the horn god. By the end of the Middle Ages, Christians had had enough of the horn god's influence on Europe's witches and pagans, and thus began the burning, the burning times. Christians turned the horn god of the old religion into the devil of their new religion, forever polluting, corrupting how most people see him. In order to extinguish the horn god's worship, they executed his followers, and upwards of 9 million people, mostly women, died as a result. With the alleged triumph of Christianity in Europe, the horn god went underground, though he was still much loved by the common people. In order to keep his memory alive, they built his face into the temples and cathedrals of the new religion, which is why the Green Man greets so many Christians at their places of worship, away from the cathedrals. Europe's witches kept the horn god alive, calling him Old Horny, in honor of his horns and his lusty nature, and making him the center of their rites. Over the centuries, the horn god survived in secret through the rites and whispers of the witches who kept his faith alive. Meeting in secret, these witches would celebrate the fertility of the earth to sing the praises of old Horny, and then eventually share their religion with younger family members. In this way, the secrets of witchcraft and the horn god survived to present day. By the start of the 20th century, beliefs in things such as witchcraft were no longer punishable by death, and both witches and the horn god remerged in society, with the need to, with the need for uh, with the need for secrecy gone, witches began writing about their beliefs and sharing their god with the general public, bringing us to today and this book. When I first found witchcraft in the early 1990s, the story you just read and or something similar was common in both books and conversations with other witches. For many people, it was something akin to uh, Holy Writ, absolutely and unimpeachable, and the stone cold truth about the horn god and the craft. Unfortunately, except for a few points, most of what you read is simply not true. There are thousands of years separating Pan and the cave figures from France, generally known as the sorcerer, with nothing in between connecting the two. In addition, the sorcerer had antlers atop his head, and most certainly not the horns of a goat, which are two very different things. It's also likely that gods such as Pan and Cernunnos arose independently of each other, each one a product of people who worshiped them and the lands that sustained these people. Most spiritual pantheons were the Greek, Norse, Native American, Yoruba, Sumerian, or Celtic, had some sort of natural deity or spirit, and more often than not, a figure related to sexual pleasure and or fertility. It's responsible that all these it's responsible that all of these figures are connected in some long ago ancestors, but not very likely. Also, all those figures have their own mythologies, stories, and models of worship, which most often share only superficial attributes. It is true that alleged witches were persecuted and executed during the late Middle Ages and early modern period, and for that pagan gods were often labeled as demons or by overzealous Christians. But there is no evidence to suggest that the witches executed during that time were practicing an ancient pagan religion in secret. The number of people estimated to have been executed during that time has been extensively revised too, with most scholars suggesting that the actual number of people executed for witchcraft was 40,000 to 100,000 individuals. The story of the horn god outlined above comes primarily from the work of Dr. Margaret Alice Murray, 1863 through 1963, and the most readable synthesis of it appears in her book, The God of the Witches. First published in 1931, Murray was a brilliant uh, Egyptologist and a truer trailblazer for women in academia. But her work concerning the history of the horn god and witchcraft was often uh, problematic. The fairness to Murray, her work on the history of witches was more of a hobby than her life's calling, but in many circles, especially witch ones, it's it's what she's most remembered for. Though Murray worked involved Though Murray's work involving the horn god has not been taken seriously by most scholars since at least the 1970s, and in most instances even before that, her work has resonated strongly for nearly 100 years now. It would probably be best to think of Murray's story of the horn god as mythology and not history. It's a powerful story that suggests how strongly people have needed figures like the horn god over the centuries. It also speaks to many of us today, even those of us who know it's not literally true. Margaret Murray is a name that will show up dozens of times in the books because her vision of the horn god was so instrumental in how we perceive him today. I also believe that she was the first person to think of the horn god as horn gods as a category of the divine. It's likely that you and I wouldn't be sharing these words right now if not for the work of uh, Murray. Uh, and while I often and while I'm often critical of her, I'm also extremely appreciative. And Mur- and Murray didn't get everything wrong. The myth of the horn god does contain a grain of truth. There were horn gods in the ancient world, and people who practiced magic in the Middle Ages, and people who truly found solace in the natural world at the start of the modern era. Pieces of the story are true, and how we put them together in our hearts and minds help to shape how we see the horn one. There was also a very real horn figure uh, on the cave wall all those thousands of years ago. The real story of that figure is worth telling. The sorcerer at Troyes Freres, please forgive me, I do not speak French. Um, Scattered throughout modern day France, Spain, and Portugal are hundreds of caves featuring images of animals, both real and imaginary, painted and carved into the rock walls. The art in some of these caves dates back over 30,000 years to the period of time known as the Upper uh, Paleolithic and Old Stone Age. The art in many of the caves are sophisticated, and there are images of animals in them that capture movement and facial expressions. In a few of these caves are images of half human, half animal hybrids. The most common images feature bison and human like appendages, but there's also at least one bird person. Many people assume that these images depict the first deities worshipped and or honored by humans, but no one is quite sure. The exact culture of the people who painted these caves is unknown, but many of the caves were used for thousands upon thousands of years. Whatever went on in the painted caves of Europe was an ongoing concern for longer than any modern religion has existed. 2 or 4 thousand years feels like an eternity to us, but the people, or perhaps peoples, who used Europe's caves did so continually for over 25,000 years. If the caves were indeed used for religion, then the religion was then the religion they used for the longest then the religion they were used for is the longest lasting one in human history. Europe's oldest figurative cave art depicting clearly identifiable animals comes from uh, Chevac Cave in southern France and was probably created over 36,500 years ago. Rediscovered in the 1990s, it was the subject of the 2010 documentary film Cave of the Forgotten Dreams. The oldest cave painting of all from the island of uh, Sulawesi, part of the modern day Indonesia, and are over 40,000 years old. The most famous of Europe's painted caves is Las Las Ca- Las Caux, also in French, whose paintings are only 20,000 years old and include striking images of horses and bulls. Most of the caves include handprints that might have been left by those who painted and carved the images of the prehistoric world. Instead of the tracing Instead of the tracing their hands, these ancient artists blew pigment around their hands and pressed them against the cave walls to create paints. This gives the handprints an otherworldly quality, judging by the prints. The artists who painted the cave, the carved and carved these images, and carved these ancient caves were predominantly women, as 3/4 of the handprint discovered by archaeologists seem to be the hands of women. When it comes to the horn god, the most interesting of these caves is the Grotte de Trios Freres, the cave of the three brothers in modern day France. Uh, this cave is a relative newcomer compared to the Las Colics and uh, Chauvet, with most of its images being only about 15,000 years old, rediscovered in the early 1910s. Uh, Troyes uh, Freres contains several unique elements missing from its cave brethren and several figures that could be a horn god. Whatever was going on at Troyes Freres, it seems as if horned and antler creatures were rather important. Though I am using the term cave to describe Troyes Freres, it's best to think of a cave such as this as a series of interconnected rooms. The most interesting elements of Troyes Freres appears nearly 3/4 of a mile in. Where the visitors were greeted by clay sculptures of bisons. There's nothing comparable to those bisons in the rest of Europe's caves. Deeper into the cave, there is a room featuring a craven a carving of a lion on the passageway containing a careful placed seashell, most likely used for some sort of devotional purpose. The most famous room at Troyes Freres is known as the Sanctuary and it is located deep within the cave. The sanctuary is famous for a couple of reasons. The first being a large wall featuring thousands of carvings of animals, both real and imaginary. The animals on the wall, which extends dozens of yards, are carved one on top of another. There is so that it almost looks like a jumbled mess. The animal carvings extend so far they all probably have not been documented yet. In the middle of the engravings found in the sanctuary uh, is an image unlike any of the others. The figure clearly has the head and horns of a bison, but his arms and legs appear human. The figure's penis is clearly visible between his legs as well, and most astonishingly, his bison man seems to be carrying a tool of some sort. At first glance, the tool appears to be a hunting bow, but it would be thousands of years before bows and arrows were created. It's much more likely that the tool is a nose flute one of the earliest instruments known to human beings. This makes even more sense the more we look at Bison Man's feet and legs, which appear to be engaged in some sort of movement, such as dancing. Unfortunately, the other carved features around Bison Man shed very little light on his activities. With the exception of one crow like creature, most of the animals carved around him don't seem to notice his presence. Because the painters and carvers of Troyes Freres did their work long before alphabets were created. We have no idea what Bison Man and the animals around him are meant to represent. It's possible that Bison Man is a person dressed in animal skins wearing the head of a bison. It's possible that he's in the middle of hunting animals, even if he's not using a bow. Bison Man is generally depicted as standing up. But he can also be crawling on the ground. Flip this page and you'll see what I mean. If he is crawling, it lends cadence to the idea that he's a hunter. He also could be some sort of ancient shaman dancing in order to ensure a successful hunt. Though we not know if people 15,000 years ago worshipped deities, he could also be a god or demigod, but there's no way to prove that. Whatever Bison Man is and whatever he's doing is unique. The second Bison Man appears even deeper in the sanctuary room in sports, and even in noticeable phallus. This Bison Man is surrounded almost entirely by bison and horns, and is missing a nose flute, which might make it more likely or less likely. Who knows that he's hunting? We'll probably never know for sure. It's also in the sanctuary room. There is an image at Tro- Troyes Fr- Freres, the most famous for the sorcerer, and most reproduced version of the image isn't a photograph, but a drawing by the first man to excavate Troyes Freres, Catholic monk and archaeologist Henry uh, Bray. Uh, Burrell, I guess. Uh, Burrell's drawing of the figure is far more detailed than the image that appears in photographs, and more well known too. Uh, Burrell's sorcerer, a name coined by the priest since he originally believed the figure was a shaman or magician, has extremely large eyes and very detailed hands and feet. Uh, Briel's drawing makes the sorcerer look like a man in a suit being x-rayed. This image is so iconic that some people, upon seeing the photograph of the sorcerer, are a bit disappointed. But I would argue that there's no reason for disappointment, even if the sorcerer doesn't appear in his cave as vividly as we might like. He's still striking. Unlike the other images around him, the sorcerer is both a painted and a carved figure. His outline is carved directly into the cave wall and outlined with black print. His placement in the sanctuary was chosen to make it seem like he's looking down at you when you are in the room and surveying both you and the animals below. The sorcerer is not a huge image, but is larger than most others in the cave. He's about 2.5 feet tall and 18 inches across. His phallus is clearly visible, and there's also an easily seen tail and a body that almost looks like a horse. The horns can be hard to make out because they are carved and not painted over, but they are easy enough to see, as are the figure's eyes. Less noticeable are his beard and mustache. If Bison Man is an enigma, then the sorcerer might be an even bigger one. It's possible that he is also dancing, but there's no nose flute to base that conjecture on. He seems separate from the carvings below him, and yet lords over them impressively. If he truly was a god, as Margaret Murray first suggested, uh, something that Brill later come to believe as well, then he was a magnificent and ancient god. We will probably never know what went on in caves such as Troyes, uh, Freres. Some think that caves served as a point of sympathetic hunting magic, like attracts, uh, like images of animals produce uh, images of animals produce animals, while others think they serve some sort of religious function. They might have also uh, uh, chronicled an individual group's history in a given area or served as a repository for dream images. It's even proposed that they are all extensive outcroppings of ancient graffiti and served no higher purpose than that. This last theory especially seems absurd given the care and work that went into the images. It's possible that figures like the sorcerer had a variety of meanings. To some people, the figures might have been connected to hunting, while others might use them as some sort of divine inspiration or to a way of connecting to higher powers. In my own ritual room, there's an image of the sorcerer hanging out on the wall, and he looks down upon my coven, much like the original image might have looked down upon people 15,000 years ago. Whatever the sorcerer was or might have been, he seems like an excellent place to begin our search for the horn god.